Welcome to Criminal Gines, a comedic true crime watch-along podcast where we watch Criminal Minds, all 15 seasons, and discuss the true crime that can be linked, however indirectly, to the episode. We're your hosts, Stacey Johnson and Veronica Shea. And this week, we're joined by Jim McDevitt discussing Season 1, Episode 3. I didn't write down what the episode name is.
We won't get fooled again.
We won't get fooled again.
Won't get fooled again. No, we.
Well, so anyone could get fooled again. Or they won't.
Excellent.
Bunch of fools up in this place.
At least someone came prepared. So we're going to do a quick recap of the episode. It is the bomber episode, our first bomber episode. And we learned that Morgan has a background in bombs, making him a true smoke show.
Hey.
But he's still concerned with Gideon's mental state, specifically when it comes to bombers. We learned about this in episode 1. There's like a backstory with a bomber, and they get into that. They decide it's not an act of terrorism very quickly because it's individuals and not large scale. And then they find out it's a forger and that he's forging the bombs that the episode 1 bomber we learn about did. So he's like, the dramatic scene where Morgan's like, I know who made the bomb, but he's in prison. You're like, okay, cool. So he's forging the bombs and they have to go deal with that bomber and he won't get fooled again. And he doesn't get fooled by the bomber this time and they catch him and not too many people die anyway. Not a lot of casualties.
Yeah.
Only a few. Okay, so that's our episode. Easy peasy. Oh, and we get to see Morgan and Garcia interact and the beginning of their relationship, which we can all agree is the best.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
So I guess we can do our gimme more right at the top.
Gimme more.
There's so many wonderful Shemar Moore moments, Derek Morgan moments in this, that to select even just a photo, because you sent it last night and I was rewatching the episode earlier, and there's a moment where he's sitting with Garcia and he just gives like this wry little smile. And I was like, that could have been it.
So here's what's really funny. Stacey knows this about the Gimme Mores is you can't take a screenshot from Hulu or like any of the streaming services. Mm-hmm. And if you pause it, it keeps all the information up so that I can't get a photo. So I'm literally taking a photo on my phone under blankets so it's dark and there's no reflection of moving pictures and then trying to get one. So
I'd say you did a really good job then.
Thank you. It's a so half of them are like he's missing a head because then I like hold down and it scans and I'm like, what is happening? Like,
yeah.
It's a real good operation we're doing.
Also,
Amazing.
Jim, I really appreciate the fact that you were like going through and trying to figure out like which Shemar Moore we were going to pick. Uh-huh. Like, oh yeah, this could be it. Yeah, no, this is a good look for him.
I mean, I'm here for a specific reason, I think, and that is that I am a devotee, I guess, of Shemar Moore. I grew up in a house where my mom would watch daytime soaps every day. So I knew him originally from The Young and the Restless. And so when you get introduced to him as a soap star, you're kind of, immediately drawn into his sexual magnetism, I guess we'll say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Aviv was like, you gotta have Jim on the show because man loves Shemar Moore. I was like, okay. I was like, who doesn't love Shemar Moore though? Yeah. Although we were talking about in like the first 2 episodes, and really he does change a lot after the first season, like when they bring in Padgett and stuff. But he's like so misogynistic in the very beginning with Elle that you're like, who is this person? I don't remember this Morgan.
Right.
But it's also like 2005, I think, was season 1. So, very different time.
But also, you were right. You hit on it. It's Garcia. That relationship is integral to his attractiveness, I guess, in this show.
Yeah, they're the baby girl. We haven't heard baby girl yet, but it's coming. And oh my gosh.
We got half of it, right? He said baby. I think
he did say baby.
He did say baby.
Very weird.
Yes.
He's on his way.
We're getting there.
It's once he takes off the like collar, button up tie sitch is when we really hit.
Or no shirts.
Oh my, yeah, that's coming up. right? Season 3, I think he's all baby oiled. And you're like,
Yeah.
what shower leaves you looking like that? Like, hello.
I'll be back for that episode.
Yeah, we'll just like, hey guys, it's me, remember?
Maybe Jim could just come in as like our Shemar Moore expert.
We'll see.
That's what we were trying to do at first.
It's a huge time commitment that you guys are devoting to this.
I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So we'll just have you back on all of the best Shemar episodes.
There's a lot of, when you hit that one where you're like, ooh, Jim's good for this one, give me a call.
Done.
Perfect. Okay, so the photo I sent you guys. So we rate Shemar Moore, understanding that he's a 10 always.
Always.
So he has to have now his own scale between 1 and 5 helpings of Shemar. What would you rate the photo? So stupid.
Oh my God.
I gotta go look at it too.
Well, I mean, I think so. You're going in order, and you've watched the first 2 episodes. I don't think it's fair of us to rate episode 3 Shemar Moore, Derek Morgan against like oily shower Derek Morgan from down the way. So
right. No, just in this episode, just this one. No other episodes. Just this episode.
Just this episode.
So do I have to announce first? Or?
Oh, you don't have to.
Okay.
I am going to give him a 4 because we do start seeing his softer side. He's taken the tie off. I like that we get a little chest clavicle action. He's, doing puzzle pieces. We learn that he's not just a slab of meat. He has a brain. He's showing us how we can profile through the bomb. Very smoldery, very little misogyny in this episode.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give him a 4 helpings.
Excellent. I'll join you on that 4. I think that, as I said, there's like that nice moment where he's with Garcia. I think it's while she's having lunch or not having lunch. And he's sort of charming and suave, and he's impressed by her ability, because she's sort of like our vehicle, right, into the show, where she's not one of these profilers. She's kind of the every person, even though she's like a tech whiz with her 15,000 computer monitors. But when she's starting to get what he's talking about, signatures, and trying to track the bombers by way of that, and he recognizes that she's like getting it. It's like this really like charming moment that the two of them share, I thought. And so it's interesting because you're right, he is kind of taking off that rigidity of the tie, but he's also not quite sex symbol Derek Morgan yet. But we're seeing elements of it. And so he's just like dipping his toe. We're all dipping our toes into the Derek Morgan pool in this episode. And so we know we can go deeper. And we will. Right.
What a in-depth, like really smart, beautiful rating that you just gave us. I was literally going to be like 3.5 because he's biting his lip.
He's hot. Well, this is what's wonderful about Derek Morgan, right? Is that he can, and Derek Morgan, but also Shemar Moore, right? Is that
correct?
He is unfairly attractive, and he is able to not just coast on the physical beauty, because he is also just like kind and charming and charismatic. And it's like, what are you supposed to do? You just have to just hit next episode and keep going.
That's right. You just fall in love with him. It's interesting that you're saying we're just like dipping our toes, because we really haven't seen Garcia a lot until this episode. They just kind of sort of check in with her. And then she, in every episode following becomes so integral. Yeah. That like, honestly, if you take her away, they fail. Like she's
completely.
Just...
Is she the only... Really. Are you all still actively watching this? I kind of fell off, honestly, probably like 10 years ago. It was before like Hodge left. But she's still, she and Matthew Graber, right?
Grey Gubler.
Grey Gubler. Yeah. I just pushed those 2 words
just
together.
MGG is a good one too.
Are still on it, right? And Paget comes back every now and then.
So I'm not watching the reboot. Is
that what they're in?
Yeah, 16 and 17 they've done. And I believe Kirsten and Matthew came back, and Joe Montaigne came back, and Paget, I think you're right. And then I dropped off around season 10 when they kept bringing in the new cast members. Mm-hmm. So by the time we hit 10, like through 15, it's going to be brand new.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, here we go. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But to also figure out down the line who the killers are, it's going to be... Because I know the back season so well where I'm like, oh, that's obviously Kemper. This one's going to be,
right.
Sam Little.
Kemper.
This one's going to be, so although Kemper's spread out around a lot of them, just like Bundy. Like, we're never going to have a Bundy episode. So we have a segment, Our Buddy Bundy, for whenever they like mention him. Because he's just too prolific. There's no Bundy episode. It's too prolific.
He's everywhere.
Yeah. They almost don't have a Dahmer episode, and I'm like trying to force one because he's my favorite serial killer.
Yeah.
But we may not end up with a Dahmer episode. So yeah, the big ones are interesting because they're so well known. But what were we talking about that we got to hear?
Just
Shemar.
Which ones is always Shemar, the gateway?
Moore.
If we're still watching.
Rounding it back.
I was asking about Garcia being sort of the through line where as people have come and gone, she remains sort of...
She does. Yeah, her and Matthew remain.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. The most consistent.
Yeah. And Hotch probably would have remained.
Yeah, if he wasn't...
But for some issues. Stacey, what about you? Are you still watching?
So I went through season 10, I think. And then I was like, I'm going to stop. And then we decided to do this podcast. And so I went back to rewatch stuff. So I'm like going back through to remind myself.
Yeah, same. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's dive in with our forger, counterfeiter, bomber.
Mr. Hofmann.
Mark Hofmann. Do you want to give us a little bit of background, Jim, on Mark?
I can. And I'll
Tell
say
us the story.
Real quick before we jump into that, I found this really interesting, which also makes me find your show that you're doing here to be super interesting because...
Oh, cool! Yay!
Well, perhaps...
We got one!
Yay! Perhaps it's like naive of me, but like, so I grew up in a house that, in addition to always having Young and the Restless on during the daytime, always had Law and Order on at nighttime.
Yes.
And so, I was very much aware of the rip from the headlines. And so I never really thought about what other shows were maybe engaging in like real world stories that were inspirations for their episodes. So I'm watching this and I'm reading the articles that you sent out and it's like, oh yeah, it's all there. But I had never even thought about it. I was like, yeah, Criminal Minds was always really interesting to me because as like a primetime procedural, it was always like a lot darker and kind of twisted. And I think I kind of appreciated that. And even like the cold open of this where the guy gets his foot blown off is like super graphic for, 9:00 on a Wednesday or whatever night this was originally.
Yeah.
Also, there seemed to be a guy who was like following the bombing victim. Like, and then we never saw him again. And I was like, what is this? It's 9 a.m., sir. Like, why are you stalking this man?
Yeah, slow down. But we do learn that that's, I think, tied to the financial dealings that he's orchestrating that sort of falls apart, which is what links all these people together for the bombing target. But anyway, Mark Hofmann. Mark Hofmann is a real-life bomber. He's from Salt Lake City, Utah. He grows up in the Mormon church. When he's 14, he's sent to England on a mission to find more Mormons, potential Mormons, and bring them back to Utah. But while he's there, like a lot of 14-year-olds who are left to their own devices, he starts like reading things and exploring other avenues and becomes like an atheist and seems to like hold a grudge against the Mormons because it seems like everything that he does after this is to like spite them. And so by like 1980, he has developed the skill of being a counterfeiter and a forger. And a lot of what he's doing are these like quote unquote historical Mormon documents that are about like the history of the Mormon church, but they're all fake. And he's doing it all to like undermine and embarrass the church. And while he's doing this, he's also dealing in actual antiquities and forging letters from the American history. So he's doing like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, Mark Twain, Emily Dickinson, letters from these people, selling them using that money to like live a lavish lifestyle, but also kind of pay off other people. And it's like this pyramid scheme where he's like promising money to people and stealing it from other people and shell game and moving it all around. And at the same time, he's doing these documents. He's also forging coins, which is like a part of the episode as well, because we have the guy in his garage who's forging the coins and making the bombs. Spoilers. And
drama.
Yes. And so he gets himself into like incredible debt by all accounts. I don't know if any sort of number was thrown out that I saw.
Over $1 million is what I saw.
That's sizable.
And that's in 1980.
Yeah,
so
85, I think, is when the bombing starts.
1.5 million.
That's legit.
There you go. Yeah, it's a lot.
And so he, in an attempt to sort of get himself out of this debt, he kind of concocts this scheme where he's going to try to broker a deal of these really like sought after Mormon documents, but he's not able to get the documents in order, like to see them even to like do a plausible forgery. And so like the people that he owes money to, the people that he owes the documents to, they all start being a little persistent about where are my papers, where's my money, blah, blah, blah. And he's starting to feel like the walls are closing in on his scheme, and he's like kind of sees no way out. And he concocts this scheme where he's going to set off these bombs or mail these bombs. And he's going to target a couple of people to sort of shift attention into like a different avenue, right? So he attacks this documents collector, and then he's targeting that collector's former boss, but the bomb ends up killing the boss's wife. And then when police sort of figure out this whole scheme and then they're coming, he decides to essentially, it seems like, end his own life, right? Because as he says, he would rather take a human life or even his own than be exposed. So it seems like his greatest fear is to be exposed as like this fraud and have his family know about it. And so he sets up a bomb that's going to blow him up. But what's the language on this show? Cursing or no cursing?
Oh, totally cursing.
So he fucks up and he doesn't kill himself, but he does blow up another bomb in his car, which is kind of what we see in the opening, in the cold open of the show. And then he gets arrested, and then sort of the whole story comes out. And this documentary that you were talking about, Stacey, that's on Netflix, I think, kind of
Murder Among the Mormons.
Yes, delves into him as, I think more about like the forging of it, right? The forgeries.
Yeah, that one dives into specifically the salamander letter.
Yeah.
Or the salamander document or something like that.
And the cover up from the church, because then they believed that to be true, and they needed to cover that up because it was, it delved very deep into like folk magics, and they're like, well, we can't have that. And then how they spun the wording of white salamander to still be the angel Moroni, even, and it was like, really, is that what we're doing?
Right, and because it's embarrassing to reveal that you were taken, by this guy. And so then, so there's more cover up there. But that is, I think, the sort of bullet points for Mark Hofmann.
Yeah, he did a lot.
In like 5 years. That's a huge amount of stuff in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think religion is very interesting. So anything that's like around religion tends to get very bonkers because religion itself, if you really were to try to explain it to like an alien, sounds insane. But I like that part of his like background is stage magic. He like, as a child, is really into magic. And I was like, okay. Like, of course you were. Which then makes sense because that's like deception on a small scale. And then and then there's another documentary on him, actually, the BBC did, called The Man Who Forged America. And I think it delves a little bit more into like all of the Americana forgeries that he did and the Emily Dickinson poem that he did. Yeah, he is kind of wild. And then as an atheist too, when he was like, because I don't believe in like the afterlife, and he was like, I was thinking about, everyone dies anyway. My victims aren't suffering because they're dead and they don't know they're dead. And I'm like, okay, but... and now you're going to serve, like, why would you tell the parole board that that's your thinking? I'm like, you're never getting out now. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, and I thought this was crazy, too. This was the first case that the DA's office in Salt Lake City used computers. They had to use a computer to keep it all together.
Yeah, that's bonkers.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, just too much information, too many, and like the analysis of the writing and the ink and everything was just too much for the human brain.
Yeah. And then even the detectives and like investigators who went into the workshop to like figure it out had a difficult time tying everything together and figuring out. And then they realized, oh, even in the evidence that he left in the privacy of his own home, there was deception in case it was discovered that there were
smart.
fake things. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that he started this whole thing out just because, like, he wanted to exude power over others. Like, there's this really great quote from one of his letters that he wrote from prison that he was just like, fooling people gave me a sense of power and superiority. Like, that's why he started it. And then money got involved and, you know. But I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and his hatred for the church. Like, I love a petty bitch. He's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to embarrass the church.
I'm a fool of church.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. They deserve fooling, don't they, sometimes?
I agree. I mean, I'm an atheist, so
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, good for you.
Yeah. But that deception was also a key part for the Bale character in the episode, where what we see at the end when he's brought to defuse the bomb that's in the police station, it's all about having the main thing that he wants, in addition to like pressing the button and blowing a bomb up, is to have Gideon, you know, apologize to him and say that like, I was wrong and you were right and you were smarter than me, because that's like what fuels him is knowing that he's like the smartest person in the room.
Totally. And I thought it was so interesting too that we really don't see the unsub that much in the show. Like, we just like kind of see him making the bombs. We see him drive the car, but we deal more with the bomber that he's forging.
Right.
And I thought that was so interesting. It's like not even really about this guy. It's okay, well, if he's trying to emulate this person, that's who we need to talk about.
Yeah. Also, real quick, when David Walker, the bomb maker, when he like barrels out of the garage in his car and hits his wife, right? And then they go into the garage, a police officer pries open the door with like a crowbar, but he just drove a car out. Like, can't they just walk in?
That's what I thought too. So I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah,
I was like,
that seems unnecessary.
This is a plot hole.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
But I did like that Walker was so meticulous in his, his tidiness, that even after like putting all of his bomb together, he like laid everything out and he put a little sheet over it and he made everything look presentable before he drove through his wife and kept going.
Or he straight up just pummeled her like a bowling ball.
She was funny. I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time with her before.
Yeah, she had the best life advice.
Yeah.
Don't marry the first man that proposes.
Exactly. Unless it's Shemar Moore.
Unless it is Shemar Moore. But I just don't understand how these church officials, I mean, by the time the salamander letter showed up, that they weren't like, what? Wait a second.
Yeah.
Because he's like saying that instead of an angel appearing, you know, it's this white salamander.
Lizard.
Yeah, it was a lizard. And this is like, we're stepping into some Scientology territory with the lizards.
I think it was like the lizard appeared and then it turned into a witch. Or I can't remember off the top of my head because it's been a while since I've watched.
You need a computer to decipher all of this.
I know, for real. But I think because the church was really hush-hush on it, and I think the only reason why they were so quiet on it was because of his background. Because at that point, he was so well established as this like person of historical documents and things like that. So an accusation of like, an actual documentation of X, Y, and Z from Joseph Smith, like, I could see why they were hush-hush about it. Everything that I've seen, I don't know that the church actually fully believed it, but they were certainly trying to hide it.
Yeah. You know, whether or not you 100% buy what somebody is bringing to you, if it pertains to your organization, there may be an inclination to like buy it just so that nobody else has it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it gets this like really weird thing and, you know, people in general, like outside of like mainstream religions and even with regard to some mainstreams are like skeptical about like what's going on with those people over there. And if you can kind of control your narrative and not let possible detractors have this like salacious information or like weird stuff that kind of paints you in a negative light, then all the more reason for you to put a lid on it.
I wonder too, because Mark Hofmann had found out that his grandparents had continued polygamy for like decades after the church had officially stopped that practice or publicly stopped that practice. And I wonder if that like played into his hatred of it, because usually when people leave religion, become atheists, whatever it is, they don't really have this hatred for the church unless something happened. You know, so it's like, it's interesting how much he wants to embarrass the church, hold power over the church. And I wonder what incident happened to make that a thing, or if he just felt like maybe they held too much power over him.
Right. I think I'm relating this a lot back to the documentary because that was like the whole focus, was his time in England, like you had mentioned, Veronica, and there was like, he just started...
Jim mentioned it.
Oh.
We look alike though, so
everybody can have credit for everything.
Whoops. I meant Jim. Joke's on you guys. I was testing you. You won. Yeah, I think it was like, I think the catalyst for that was his time in England and his discovery and like opening up his eyes to like the world. Yeah, more life experience. I don't know. But yeah, I believe that was the catalyst for it, was his time in England.
Like, I would understand that making him an atheist, but to just like downright hate the church, to be like, I'm going to dedicate my life to forging documents.
Yeah.
Like,
why not just come back and sort of wash your hands of it and move on with your life?
Well, that's what normal people would do. But is Mark Hofmann normal?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's part of that.
What is normal, Stacey?
Great question. I'm the worst person to ask that.
But it does seem like with his family and not wanting to appear like a fraud, in addition to this sense of superiority that he wanted to have, that there's also a part of him that's concerned with like keeping face with his family and those around him. And so, you know, if he's coming back at 14 and he's identifying as an atheist, he's still like with his family. And so if he's not inclined to disappoint them, then he's got to sort of keep up face and sort of play the role of the dutiful Mormon, right? And so perhaps there was a resentment that was forged in that time where he had already decided that he didn't really believe in it, but then he was forced for these internal reasons that he has to continue to engage with it. And like, yeah, and maybe something else happened. I mean, you never know.
It's just so interesting. It's like, what, you know, I don't know.
I think like, okay, all right, picture it. You're 14.
Set the scene.
You're in an oppressive state, right? Everything that you're doing is being controlled by X, Y, and Z, and very specific in his Mormon churchness. I don't know what the words are. But then you go out to England. You are technically on a mission. You have freedom in a sense, and you explore and you get that feeling. And then your eyes are opened and recognizing how oppressive it is and this life that you've been living. And any normal person would have come back and just washed their hands of it, like you said, but he decided to take matters into his own hands.
Yeah, well, and he did say that he liked to impress people with deception. So like starting from magic and then coins, and then I guess it would have been impressive as a young guy to be finding, quote unquote, these things that get authenticated.
It's kind of funny too. Sorry, now I'm bouncing all over the place. So he was in debt, massively in debt, but like, you know, a little bit of a lavish lifestyle, but a lot of it too was like first edition books. So he was like forging while also having this collection of like legit artifacts of things that he didn't have to forge.
Yeah, he used his 4G money to buy
actual stuff.
Real stuff. I get that. I get that.
Did you guys read into anything on like, so it's funny because there's a lot of, right now, I think because of this episode and the documentary and all this stuff that came out on the Salamander letter, they're toting like his grandest scheme was the missing document of the Oath of a Freeman. Did you guys read into any of that?
The one he was trying to sell to the Library of Congress?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was like a one-page oath that had been printed in 1639. It was supposedly the first document to be printed in Britain's American colonies, and only about like 50 copies had been made, and none of them were extant. I think they were toting like worth over the million in 1985, so God knows what that is now. But yeah, that to me, it's interesting that this salamander letter got so much press when that is being touted as his like grandest scheme.
Yeah, well, I think because the Library of Congress never accepted it. They didn't authenticate it, and that's where it started to unravel, where they were like, wait, what? And then his other stuff started getting looked at. And the Mormon thing is so crazy. It's like it's a lizard. It's a lizard. That's what you're selling the church.
Yeah.
Like you're starting Scientology. That's what he's like, oh, you know who had a good idea? Ron Hubbard. Lizards. That's what we're doing. Put that in the next one. Like, that's wild. And also Mormons have been getting a lot of press is the wrong word, but a lot of attention between that documentary and then the series Under the Banner of Heaven.
Yeah, with Andrew Garfield.
Which is also true crime. I could not get through the book. It's pretty dry, but the show's so good. And, there's a bunch of documentaries on the FLDS and that craziness. So they have been getting a lot of attention recently, which is interesting. I feel like maybe the Catholics are like, go look at the Mormons for a little bit. Yeah. Look what they're doing. Look at their pies.
Give us a break.
Look at their pies.
Yeah, give us a break.
For real. So he got a life sentence or 2 life?
He got 1 life sentence. I think he really only... the trial was weird because they really didn't go to trial. They did a plea deal.
That's right. They did a plea deal with him.
Yeah, and I went to go check my notes. I have no notes on the trial. So this is all by memory. You guys be impressed.
Already impressed.
New York let him plead out, and that was the Library of Congress one. He is just really serving life for the murder charges at this point.
Yeah, and I think he has like ability of parole, but he went to board and they like flat out told him that he is never getting out.
Well, again, in his letter, he said, I don't care about human life because they don't know they're dead. Why are you saying that to the people who, parole boards are already keen to not let you out. Right. They're like, you did something, even if you didn't do something, they're like, you were here for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would go to a parole board and say, hey, not sorry. Don't give a fuck.
Right.
They don't know they're dead. Like, you're not getting out. But then again, if you think about it, because, like, we've all had struggles with money or with, like, work or anything, right? Like, you're like, this is too much to handle. And money stresses are some of the, like, highest stresses you can have because it just makes everything worse. Maybe there's a part of him that's like, I don't want to leave free housing, free room and board, free meals. Like, I don't have to worry about anything.
Free HBO.
Shit's
expensive. It's getting
for real.
It all adds up. There's hardened criminals say they can't live outside of prison. They've been institutionalized at that point. And it's like there is no life outside of prison.
Right. Which
Stacy deals with all the time.
All the time.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, I teach rehabilitative programming at a correctional facility.
Excellent. That's awesome.
Thank you.
He didn't say you are excellent.
I know. I need you to explicitly say.
You, Stacy Johnson, are excellent.
Thank you.
Don't let that go to your head. No.
Too late.
This is why I can't be here every week.
Come on.
The headphones wouldn't fit on that big head.
No. Can Jim be a reg?
No. Jim's fired. We're going to find someone else for this episode.
See you later.
I love it.
But yeah, Mormonism is kind of crazy because I almost feel like they started with forgery anyway. Like, it's such a young, well, again, Scientology, I guess, is the youngest. But like, in the scheme of things, a very young religion. Again, I'm saying this from the point of an atheist. So like anyone listening, we're just going to say this is an academic thing that all religions are stories. And some of them are delightful stories and some of them are Sodom and Gomorrah. But here we are. And, it's Truly. This guy goes out into the woods and finds gold plates that he shows one person and then loses. Like, that feels like a forgery in and of itself. And then they, from memory, transcribe what was on the golden plates, which they then also lose. Like, it's just like forgery after forgery, lie after lie, story after story. you know, I don't know, this feels right for the Mormons, honestly.
Right. And we know that from years and years of crime procedurals that eyewitness testimony is not reliable. So, you know, if you don't have the thing that you're copying, but you're going from memory, chances are it's not super accurate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, all of a sudden, it was, oh, God told me polygamy. Oh, right. All of a sudden, God, you know, it's like, okay, well,
yeah.
God's talking to you a lot, because I think Moses had, like, the one in, you know, the burning bush.
Mm-hmm.
I think Muhammad had, like, the one time. Mm-hmm. Jesus was different, but he came back, so he could be like, hey, guys, went talk to Dad. I'm back now. You know, it's like... John and Joseph, John, Paul, and Ringo were following Jesus, and
Ringo,
but and all of his people. You know, it's like God seems to be real chatty with the Americans,
mm-hmm.
and not so much with
Such an
everyone
American
else.
sensibility.
Yeah, like it just feels a little, I don't know, easy.
It seems like a way to justify your desire to be married to a bunch of women at the same time.
Girls, I'm going to say.
Sure, yeah, sorry, children.
Girls.
Yeah.
Those are 12-year-old, I think, is when... Yeah. Oh, that's another documentary that... Oh, wait, I got to Google it. Sorry, keep going, Jim. I'm going to Google it.
No, well, I mean, yeah, I'd say, you know, anytime that you have a desire and it doesn't jive with the common acceptance of the time, if you just say God told you to do it, it kind of, in your own mind and in that of certain peers, gives validity to it, right? So I'm not saying that the only reason that Mormonism is a thing is to be married to children, or lots of children and women. But I am saying that if that was something you wanted to do and you thought you wouldn't get away with it, if you say that it's part of your religion, and, you know, because we live in a country where freedom of religion is respected and to a certain extent, then it's a good way to force people to let you do it, right?
Yeah, so, and that's true. And it would definitely be attractive to the people who wanted that lifestyle. Oh, the documentary though is called Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, which is what they tell the women.
That.
I don't like that.
It's not great. And it's real creepy. And they take the children away, and that's how they keep the women in line. And it's a very interesting documentary. And like they
excommunicated a ton of like teenage boys from the church at that point, so that the children girls could be given to the older men in the compound. And then there was this massive compound built in Texas, I think, where essentially all of the like little girls were sent to go and serve what was his name? What's the leader of the
Warren Jeffs.
There we go. Yeah, to essentially serve him. And then like they tour, and there's like this big old like it's real creepy.
And he was on the run at the time, and they were sending him money.
And they're still sending him money. Like his influence from within is insane.
At that point, it's a cult. Like, I'm sorry, that's not a religion. That's a cult. Waco wasn't a religion. It's a cult. I'm going to say it. Scientology is not a religion. It's a cult.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Don't put that in the descriptor. Or this will get shut down real quick.
I know. It's like, if you have to go live somewhere and you're cut off from people, and you're having basic rights taken away from you, that's not a religion. Sorry about it. It's not. I don't know. That's just one atheist perspective. I'm going to get killed.
No, you're fine.
Maybe.
Here enough.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, so the Mormons have been getting a lot of attention recently.
Yes, they have.
Interestingly enough. So I'm from Nevada, and we have a lot of Mormons. And
yes, we do.
There was like a Mormon house on pretty much our public school campus that they would go for a period.
I remember.
Yeah, and do like Mormon studies or whatever. But every single Mormon I know, every single one is so nice. They're family oriented. very smart, very wonderful people, and then you delve into like the backstory of everything and you're like, oh, this is crazy. Like what you believe is insane. But I would say that also about any religion. Like you think someone came back to life? Are you serious? You think a guy talking to himself and seeing a burning bush is not schizophrenic? Like what? What? Like what are we talking about here? You know? But like I think older religions too have that ability to razzle dazzle and hide behind how old they are and the mysticism of old, and like Catholics really lean into some mysticism bullshit. You know, if you go to mass, it's a production and you're like, oh yeah, this is heavy, this is God, you know. And then you have the new religions and you're like, what are you doing? But you know,
they're just trying to stand
500
out.
years, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, the same weirdness. So I don't know. The whole thing is wild. Yeah, good pies, though.
Maybe that's good pies. Maybe that's part of, you know, they're trying to sell themselves, right? Because when you're the new kid in town, you need to make yourself more appealing because everything else is already so well established. So if you want to bring some people over to your team, you need to sort of incentivize. And so maybe that's...
Hey, look! Child brides.
Yeah.
Hey.
I know some of you out there like your child brides. Oh, we have more child brides.
Yeah. And to be fair, at that period of time, you were being married at 14, like boys and girls.
Sure.
And then it got weird.
Yeah,
you know, when it's like, oh, 14-year-old boys cannot marry.
Right.
But the 47-year-olds can marry the 14-year-old. That's when it gets gross. And now, obviously, I do 18. You know, not 14. Not now 14.
Yeah.
At all. No, like that was then. Historical context.
Let's just all just wait for a while.
We'll just wait as long as.
Don't marry the first person that proposes to you, even if they're 50 years older than you.
Even if they're Shemar Moore.
Yeah. If you're 14, yeah, but I don't think he's like that.
No, because he's perfect.
Yeah. There's no way he's into that shit.
Okay, well, if you guys were to forge stuff, what would you forge? And what would you spend the money on?
That's a good question.
I don't know. What would I forge? Veronica, do you have an answer?
No.
Well, I think also it's tough though now, right? Because I think people are maybe a bit more skeptical. So you couldn't do anything that's like $2,000, right? That would get you some sort of insane amount of money because that it just wouldn't happen. It wouldn't fly. So, I mean, oh dang, I don't know.
I think I would forge information. So like if you could become like a spy and then disseminate false information.
Okay.
Just to see what kind of chaos
what got out there
you could drum up. And you know, you could start like the second Cold War. That could be a fun time.
Sure.
Yes.
It could be.
Could not be, but it could be.
I'll just say this because I'm sort of surrounded by a bunch of records and I don't have the means to make any actual records, but I would maybe make some like counterfeit records that are hard to find or very sought after and just lower the price a little bit from what they tend to sell at on eBay.
You could do the Motley Crue Original 5 record deal because I have been trying.
Is that what you're looking for? All right.
Yeah, and I only have 3 of them and I am too short. And they are so hard to I have to go look over and see.
Interesting.
And like really, so when the movie came out, The Dirt, they reprinted. So now there's a whole bunch of reprints of like Girls, and like those albums and stuff. But it is hard to find the OGs, I'll tell you. So I would pay for that.
Okay. Well,
how would you do that?
I'll get working on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know because I don't make records, but I think I think it's fairly easy if you have the means, right? So basically what they do is you take like a metal plate and the groove that gets cut into it is where like the music gets trapped. Now I couldn't explain that to you, like how music gets trapped inside of a groove.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. And so your original is probably taken from like the original like master tapes that they recorded to. But like if you were to buy a bootleg of it, it's probably just like the MP3 that's streamed off of Spotify onto like a plate and then the wax gets pushed into that and sealed, gets cut. And then, because like I have a couple of bootlegs, like I have a bootleg My Bloody Valentine record and a bootleg Marilyn Manson record. And, they sound fine, but I think a true audiophile would recognize that I had some bullshit in my collection. But I don't really care. I'm not interested in giving Marilyn Manson any money. So I'm happy to take like a bootleg.
Yeah.
I find him fascinating as an individual, but also like a piece of shit. And so there's a part of me that finds his music from a certain period of time to be very interesting. I find like the mythos around him to be very interesting in the same way that we do these sort of true crime people that we're talking about. But like, I don't need to sit down with the guy and like have a meal with him, and I don't need to give him any money. So I'm happy to listen to my bootleg record.
Fair enough. I was having such a hard time figuring out what to forge that I literally just had to Google it.
What to forge? How can I make money forging?
Like, what can I do to forge? And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And so then I tried to erase my history.
Yeah, put on your incognito window, Stacey.
I know, I didn't do that.
Oh,
and then I was
Lord.
like panicking just now. And I still don't have an answer of what I would forge. Like,
Yikes.
I don't know. Like,
art seems to be easy.
Art? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Well, that's really popular.
Yeah, so my first inclination, my cousin Brian was one of the original suspects in the Gardner Museum art heist, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's get into
Wait,
this. Here we go. Tell us
and-
about that. What is that?
So actually, the WBUR, the NPR affiliate in Boston, and the Boston Globe did this really great podcast a few years ago called Last Seen, where basically each episode delved into the case as like a whole, but it spent like an episode doing a deep dive into each person that was a suspect at like various points. And so there's an entire episode that's about my cousin, but it was, I don't know what year, it was like 1991. I was 7. So I don't think I ever met this guy, but he's a member of my family. And he was a prime suspect for a minute because he had been convicted of a crime previously where the MO was sort of the same, where he had dressed up as a security guard to gain access to a museum in upstate New York and had stolen some stuff. So what happened is there's this museum we have in Boston called the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It was this woman's entire personal collection that fills this Italian style building that she had built in Boston in like the mid 1800s.
It's
I
beautiful.
think. Yeah,
It's
super
very,
beautiful.
very beautiful.
And on a weekend after St. Patrick's Day, I think 1991, 1992, a couple of quote unquote, for those at home, police officers responded to a silent alarm at the museum. They were let in by the security guards. They tied up the security guards. They took, I think it's like 7 pieces of art, but most notably were a couple of Rembrandts that have been missing now for over 30 years. They are extremely valuable. They are extremely sought after. It's like one of the most significant art heists, certainly of the modern era, and the most sort of like theorized and talked about. There was like a Netflix documentary a few years ago about it.
Didn't they just like cut the frames too?
Yeah. They didn't like pop off the frames and take off the backs and pull the paintings out. They just cut them out. So if you go to the museum, the frames are still up there in their original locations, but with the blank backgrounds. But in the most recent season of Cobra Kai, one of the villains had the painting in his house.
Amazing.
So he had purchased it on the black market. But there was always this theory that like because the paintings were so renowned, you wouldn't be able to just steal them and sell them on the black market, right? You'd have to have somebody lined up ahead of time that would be a buyer. Then there was this whole connection to Whitey Bulger where they thought that he had taken them to Ireland and they were being sold overseas. And I mean, nobody knows where they are. It's a whole thing. So my initial thought was, let's forge some art, because people seem to get away with that for a really long time, but not these Rembrandts. You would get pretty fucked, I think, if you tried to sell those. Yeah.
This was your cousin?
Yeah, so it's like a second cousin once removed. So it's like my dad's first cousin's son, if you can draw that out and think about that.
Epic
but we are related.
crime.
We have the same last name. Brian McDevitt was his name. You can Google him.
That's insane.
Yeah.
My family just does normal crimes.
Nice. Good for them.
My family doesn't do crime, you guys.
Lame.
Get with it. Lame.
Wait, so your cousin once removed, second cousin squared?
Yeah. Second cousin.
He was a suspect in it, or he was?
No. Yeah, he was.
No, they never caught the guys, right?
They never caught the people that did
right.
it. They've never recovered the art. And so, yeah, he was an initial suspect. He was somebody that the police and the FBI had talked about.
Because he did a crime in New York? Is that what you
Yeah, he had been arrested a few years earlier for a crime in New York where he snuck in or used a disguise as like a security guard to gain access to a museum in upstate New York.
And he stole art?
Yeah. He's a con man.
That's so wild.
So either, so maybe he was involved in some way, but I don't think that he, kept it and has like a secret panel in his, well, he's dead now, but.
He had like a panic room with all of these Rembrandts, and he would go and just sit, drink tea, and read a book among the Rembrandts.
That's beautiful. I would love to do that.
I didn't know that they thought Whitey Bulger had a connect, because he was discovered in Santa Monica.
Yes, where his days of freedom. Yeah, before he was transferred back to Boston. Yeah, interesting.
Well, and then there was another really good heist movie that's like part movie, part documentary called American Animals. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that was about a book heist. And these like college kids went on and stole the most expensive books from like their school libraries. And it was the big book of like bird portraits is how I describe it. It's like everyone kind of knows what it's like. Darwin's On the Origin of Species.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like this giant book. But that's a really fun movie. It's got Evan Peters in it.
Do you know what else is a really great documentary on like stealing things that are important? National Treasure.
I mean, it's...
Yeah. That's great.
It's amazing how much access that documentary crew had to the heist.
Absolutely. And who knew? Nic Cage is involved in a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah,
Did you know he's a vampire?
Oh, yeah. I want to see that.
It's very good.
I'm actually reading a book on Nic Cage right now. Yeah, hold on real quick. I'll just go grab it.
Yes, please.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yes, for any of the people that are still listening, I'm going to do a little plug for The Age of Cage. 4 decades of Hollywood through one singular career, written by film critic Keith Phipps, who's part of the Next Picture Show podcast team. You can read his writings everywhere, but it starts, I'm not super far into it, 7 pages? No, that can't be right.
Like, I started reading it right before we jumped on.
Yeah, I've actually been reading it halfway through this conversation.
That's fair.
Yeah, so it starts, sort of dissecting what it was like to grow up in, like, the Coppola family at the time that he grew up, and, like, why he felt the need to sort of change his name. And
I didn't know he was a Coppola.
Yeah, his name... Yes, there you go. You should read the book.
What?
Yeah,
this is insane.
His uncle is Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah, he's the son of Francis's older brother, I think is how it works. Yeah. But he didn't want to be treated a certain way or associated necessarily. Yeah, he wanted to do his own thing, right? So we changed his name.
Sophia should take notes.
Yeah. So he's just trying to pave his own way. And I feel like he's kind of done that by doing
definitely
everything that he does. He's just like, I'm just Nic Cage. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, his fandom is something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It has its own life.
I'm enjoying whatever they're calling it, the Cageissance or the
Cageissance?
The Renacage.
The Renacage?
I'm just making
this
up
is
words.
Amazing. Keep going.
Yeah, he's had quite a few come out recently.
Yeah. I kind of missed the sort of like straight to video, like the Mandy, which I heard like amazing stuff. But I guess I kind of, rechecked in around Pig, which I thought was really wonderful. And then The Massive Weight of Unbearable Talent with Pedro Pascal. And I mean, that movie was just like a fucking hoot. I loved it so much. So I'm excited to see Renfield.
All right, forging. So we've decided we could forge art and books and records. Stacey can't forge anything.
I'm still panicking. Maybe what I would do is like I was trying to think because I was literally like Googling things that are forgeable. Like maybe I could like lie and forge like plant bulbs because that shit goes like for bazillions of dollars of like rarity plants and seeds and things like that. So maybe I could be like, here's your seeds, your fake seeds. your real seeds. I mean, I can't say fake seeds because
you don't want to sell
up
them
already.
And would they just be like wildflower seeds, or would they be like dead bugs?
Therein lies the issue. Like, I would have to forage plants. I would forage plants.
I think the idea of selling foraged seeds is kind of ingenious, right? Because...
Thank you.
Well, I do.
Jim's never back on this. You're never back on this. You're too nice to Stacy.
Yeah, I'm pumping Stacey up too much. You know, if you have like a painting or a book or whatever, Antiques Roadshow will tell you, you know, or the people on the Pawn Dealers or whatever that show is, the place in Vegas. Pawn Stars. Like, they're pretty quick to tell you that this isn't authentic. But if you're selling seeds, wouldn't you at least need to wait until it grew into something? And by then you'd be gone.
Then I'd be gone. And then I could always just be like, well, you probably messed it up.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's your soil.
It's your soil. And did you check the acidity
probably
levels,
overwatered.
the pH level? Exactly.
Or underwatered. You either overwatered or underwatered.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. Oh, man, you guys, new business venture.
Okay, seeds.
Mm-hmm. Like rare seeds.
When you do Google how to succeed in doing that, please make sure you put on the incognito window.
I know. I was panicking the whole time as I was looking this up. I was like, oh, crap. And then I was spiraling. And then Veronica was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was like, you look weird and I can hear you typing. What are you doing?
I'm going to have to be the new co-host next week because Stacey's going to be in jail for Googling how to make money doing forgeries.
Right.
I'm terrified I'm on a list because I don't know how to do an incognito window, and I look up a lot of serial killer and weird shit. We're lucky I can turn on my computer, okay? I mean, honest to God, if I was in an incognito window, I could probably never get out of it. Like, I don't...
Didn't you lose your laptop for a while, too?
Yeah.
I think all you need to do, though, is just tell people that you're a writer, right?
Yeah,
that's
like
true. That's why half of the shit that's in my like Google search history is there. And it's like I'm doing research.
Yeah, that's true.
Leave me alone, FBI.
Yeah, research.
Yeah.
They're like, why are you researching specific ways to forge?
You know, I believe in specificity and character. That makes sense to me.
And they're like, show us your work. You're like, well, I cut that part out. It ended up weighing down the story.
Yeah, no bulbs, no seeds.
We just Stacy in the back splitting little pea pods, Mendel style, to see what takes and what doesn't.
Oh my gosh. I'll just like end up giving up one day and just put like poppy seeds in all of it and be like, here you guys go. This is a rare tulip.
And they're like, this looks like a poppy. I know. Very rare tulip. Looks like poppies.
Yep, it's a very rare tulip.
We've really devolved. Oh, one thing we learned, and they actually did put in the articles, like you said, the minute he blew himself up, he quickly became the only suspect. Mm-hmm. And they say very quickly they have to clear all of the bomb victims because that's who you look at first, because they do tend to blow themselves up, which I thought was so funny, really.
Interesting fact.
It's like, yeah, that makes sense, though, that they would just end up by accident blowing themselves up.
It's dangerous work, right?
It is dangerous work.
Yeah, well, Hodge says that there's like 3 types of bombers, right? There's like the terrorist bomber who's out to elicit fear. There's the like an ideological bomber who's, you know, maybe it's religious based or whatever. And then there's the one who's trying to cover up a crime, which was weird because he said there were 3 types. And then one of the cops was like, well, what do we have here? And then Gideon's like, we have a murderer.
Yeah, not a terrorist, a murderer.
Yeah. He's not one of these things. He's just using bombs as a weapon. But it was one of them.
Yeah, he was. He was trying to cover up. And we see that with, there's a few arson cases where it's like, is this an arsonist or a murderer who uses fire? Because they are profiled differently, which I think is so interesting, like depending on what you categorize as. And, you know, I guess anyone would think, well, if you're an arsonist, if you're a bomber, it's because you light off bombs and you set fires, but really, if murder is your goal, that is very different than just liking to set off bombs and liking to set things on fire.
Yeah, these like devotees of Baal that are in this chat room that he's frequenting.
Yeah, how is he getting so much unfettered access to the internet? What is that?
I guess you're just allowed to.
You'd be surprised. surprised.
That feels
There's,
insane.
I mean, Veronica is surprised.
I am very shocked because I know that they read all of the mail that goes in and out. So
Snail mail.
It's also 2005, right? I guess that's something we need to consider. Like maybe sort of more monitored now.
Or like firewalls now.
Yeah.
He was really able to just click on "Give me young girl tits," and like, you know what I mean? That like Garcia sent him, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
What? And he's talking to his fans in the chat room of how to make bombs and don't let them take you alive. What?
I thought it was interesting, because they're good with their hands, right? They're like handymen. They're afforded this time by themselves, but they also identified as tradesmen, right? That's because they're more, I guess, mechanically oriented people that the bomb then becomes their vehicle of attack. I thought that was interesting and part of the profile.
Bombs are interesting. Definitely more interesting than arsonists. We did arson last week, and oh my god, boring. Arsonists are boring.
There's an episode that will come up where a guy is later on is turning people into like marionettes. Do you guys remember this episode?
Yes.
I need to be on for that one.
It's a woman. I think it's Uncanny Valley.
Yes, it's a woman.
She's turning them into dolls.
Dolls. Yeah.
No, I think it's a different one. There might be multiple
doll episodes.
Yeah. Oh, maybe is that what it is? The lesson? I remember there being this really like creepy piano version of a Pixie song being played over like one of the doll performances. Yeah, it is season 8, episode 10.
Okay, you want to be? I'll put you on right now for that one.
It's a little ways down the road, but I remember being like really unsettled by that episode. And I can't tell you anything else that's going on at this point, but I think he's probably kidnapping people and then tying them up and turning them into dolls and it's weird shit.
Yeah, that's so funny that they have two different ones. So a puppet and a doll episode. The doll episode freaked me out. The Uncanny Valley one freaks me out.
Freaked me out. And you want to know why it freaked me out? Because my stepmom, let me go in. She's got this like big curio cabinet of porcelain dolls, and every time I like go upstairs, I see these dolls, and I feel like they're watching me. And it's all porcelain dolls, and they're all in the little frilly things, and it's just like the ones in the episode.
Yeah, there's something about porcelain dolls that I think are very unsettling for a lot of people.
Yeah, and what was her name? Okay, relating it back to Mormons, here we go. Marie from Donnie and Marie was on QVC for like ages peddling porcelain dolls. She was Mormon.
I thought that was going to be a bigger tying back.
No, I really set it up to be a really big tie back, but then I was like, oh crap, it's just about porcelain dolls. Ergo, Mormons, salamander letter, forgery, Mark Hofmann, done.
Don't marry the first man that proposes.
Yeah. Unless it's Shemar
Moore.
That's done.